Yes. I'm wondering how to check if we have our viewers coming in. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you guys for joining us today for the webinar. My name is Hershey Goodladona, and I am the Webinar and Corporate Outreach Lead for UT Dallas's Global Mobility Club. So again, thank you guys for joining us today. I want to give a short introduction to global mobility and what we do on campus. So GMC's purpose is to bring awareness to the global mobility industry and provide advice on campus engagement and, of course, career opportunities for our students. And we host diverse events every semester, which do include the case competition that you guys might be familiar with, the career fair, and of course, a webinar series. And so we do hope that through our events, students can explore a potential career path and explore global mobility. And so we're also partnering with them, the Forum for Expatriate Management, which is the first major organization designed solely for global mobility practitioners. So I would love to thank Claire Tennant-Skull for her continuous support to make the webinars possible. So one thing before I pass it off to Claire is we would love to facilitate and encourage discussion throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, please do feel free to put your questions in the comment section. We have two lovely speakers who are more than happy to get to your questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Claire.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Hershey. And yes, I'd just like to say I'm very pleased and proud that FEM is continuing its association with UTD and with the GMC, the Global Mobility Club. I think, we were all really impressed with the students when they did the case competition at our America Summit last year. And I'm very pleased to say we'll be doing that again this year with a fresh new set of challenges and a new set of teams. So I really hope that people will get involved in that. I hope the students will step up and get involved and take part in the competition. And I also hope that people in the global mobility community will come to the event and listen to the students along with all our other sessions over the 2 days in May. But, one of the things about the case competition is that the audience will vote for the winners. So it's a really good way to sort of see the fresh new talent that's coming into the industry, and for the students, as Hershey has said, to gain an understanding of what careers in global mobility might look like. So just a very quick plug again. Hope you're going to come to our America's Summit. That's going to be May 22nd and 23rd. That will be back in Dallas, but not at the university this time, but downtown at the Warwick Melrose Hotel. Anyway, on to the webinar today. I'm really pleased to be taking part in this again. I was fortunate to be included in some of the briefing, and I know that Jonathan and Jordan, excuse me, have some really interesting things to share with you. I would encourage everyone to send in some comments and questions, and if there's anything that comes up that you don't quite understand or you want clarification on, please do let us all know. So I know Jonathan and Jordan can tell you a little bit about themselves, first of all, and then we'll get on to our discussion. So Jonathan and Jordan, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for that introduction, Claire. We're excited to be here. Excited for everything that UT Dallas is doing. It's exciting. I came, and my first job was relocation directly out of college. And so this kind of comes full circle, my whole relocation career. also pouring into the lives of the next generation who's coming after us with very exciting relocation items. So, Jordan, I think we have some bio slides if we want to put them up there. And then my name is Jonathan Frick. I'm with Odyssey Relocation. I've been with Odyssey for about 5 years now, but in the industry for about 13 years. I'm currently based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My role right now is technology based. So I provide the technological solutions both for the relocating employee, for my consultants, and for our clients, the corporate clients, as well as reporting solutions. My background is numbers and technology. So if it's a little bit dorky, I probably have dabbled in it, and I really enjoy that side of the relocation sphere. So excited to talk through what we can do. Odyssey Relocation, we're a relocation management company. We help people move every single day in order to help our clients get their people where they need to go. So logistic management, everything from organizing household goods, temporary living, the financial elements. So money is a very big factor that underlines everything. And it's part of the reason we're talking today is how we can make sure that we're being fiscally conservative and good stewards of our company's money whenever we're relocating people. So that's what we do. Jordan, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name's Jordan. I lead our product and partnerships team here at AIRINC. So just a little bit about AIRINC. Basically, we are a data firm. We specialize in international data research. We collect the cost of goods and services and typical living costs, relocation costs, all across the globe. We take those costs, we turn them into different technology solutions. We also provide a lot of advice and consulting work. I've been at AIRINC for about 7 years now. I've been working in the mobility industry for over 20 years. So very happy to be with you here today. So Jonathan, I think you wanted to start by sharing a cost projection and kind of walking us through what typical costs we might see in a relocation.
I think it's a great place to start. That's going to kind of level set us as far as what benefits could be considered as part of an expatriate move. Not necessarily all of them. It's not all inclusive by any stretch of the imagination. But it's a really good place to begin as we dive into the conversation of cost efficiency, optimizing benefits and return on your investment for relocation purposes, etc. So this is just a quick example. The scenario here is we have a person moving from New York in the United States over to London. They're going to be there for 2 years. And the intent is they're bringing their family with them, family of 3 altogether. If we scroll down a little bit, we kind of segmented costs into different categories. And we'll start with pre-assignment costs. I like Hershey said, the intent here is to be conversational. So if you have questions, feel free to add them to the comments and we'll address as we go. Or Claire, Hershey, Jordan, feel free to add additional commentary or add questions. But pre-assignment costs, a lot of companies do candidate testing. Now, candidate testing is not just finding the right person, but finding the right person that can also handle living overseas at the same time. We all know there's job requirements, but are you able to do the job requirements in a very displaced scenario where you're in the location that's not what you're familiar with, but might be a little bit foreign for you? So we test and make sure that they can handle that. Tax consultation. Yeah, Jordan.
Sorry, just one thing to add about so if we're talking about cost optimization, the most expensive thing, part of an assignment is a failed assignment, right? And so what Jonathan is talking about is making sure that you sort of do your checks and make sure that this is the right person. And more importantly, maybe their family is ready for this type of experience. It is very, very expensive to send someone overseas and then immediately bring them back home.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Tax consultation. If you're going overseas, you're going to have more complicated tax scenarios than if you had stayed at home. And taxes, as we know, are complicated by their very nature. And add 2 countries worth of tax scenarios and you're going to get double the complication. Immigration services, we need to make sure that you are legally allowed to work in that location. And so working through the visa process of getting the necessary thumbs up from the necessary entities is going to be key. And that has complications that you need to get subject matter experts involved, lawyers involved in order to make sure that the right documents are filled out in the right order, the right interviews don't take place, etc. And then ultimately pre-decision home finding trip. This is actually sending the individual overseas, potentially with their family, in order to take a look at the location, meet the office staff, identify what the job is going to entail, look at the extracurricular activities, such as what are the schools like, what are the gyms and the sport environments like, because you're going to be living there. You're not just doing a job. You are moving your entire family to a new location, and you're going to be living there. Then we get into the next step, actually moving to the location. And I don't have to dive into each of these too deep. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Household goods shipments, that's getting your stuff from one place to the next. So you have, I don't know, your guitar to play in the new location. Are you going to leave your guitar at home? That's a question that you need to answer and be able to identify if you're putting it on the shipment to go to the new location. Cultural training. This is where you're going to have a training about the culture of the new location. I've heard even jumping from one state to the next in the United States could use some cultural training, because the West Coast is just as different from New York as New York can be from London sometimes. And so identifying what are the cultural differences, so that you have the mores in the background necessary to interact with the locals whenever you arrive at the location, and don't get yourself into culturally compromising scenarios. You actually need to travel the location. That's where we're getting into final trip. Temporary living. When you arrive at the new location, you probably won't have a home ready for you. It's very possible. And so we'll put you into temporary accommodations while we wait for the new house to be ready, or alternatively, while we wait for the shipment, which takes multiple weeks to get from point A to point B, to arrive so that your bed is ready in your new house, for example. During that time, we need car rentals. Miscellaneous allowance. This is a really hotly debated topic. This is a cash amount provided to the employee in order to cover miscellaneous items. This could be breaking gym memberships in the home location. This could be jumping cell phone plans from the old location to the new location. This could be taking care of your pet. You'll see I don't have any pets shipment items here. Maybe they have a little Cocker Spaniel they need to relocate. This is what this could be utilized for in order to offset the costs of moving that aren't covered by any of these other line items. Auto loss on sale. Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Sorry, Jonathan. I was just wondering whether you would, or whether corporations would give any advice on how to spend that miscellaneous allowance, because I can kind of imagine that some people might think it's they could end up using most of it in an area that is perhaps not so essential, and then they find that they haven't got the means for something else that actually is more important.
Jordan, I'm going to throw this one over to you. What do you think?
So I think that this is why a pre-assignment briefing is really important. Yeah. And so companies like Jonathan's company, a relocation management company, will have counselors that will speak directly to the assignee and walk them through the policy, walk them through each of these benefits, help them to understand what is being provided as part of the policy and what they may need to watch out for or plan for. And so I think that, it's hard to give somebody a really defined guide, because I think everyone's situation is different. And that's what this particular benefit relates to, is that we can't know all of your specific needs, right? And so we provide this for you, but a little bit of coaching ahead of time can help you to spend it wisely.
Great, thank you.
Great breakdown. On loss and sale, you're going to be disposing of your vehicles in the home location. You probably aren't going to ship them, because mechanic and requirements of mechanics between one country and the next vary significantly. And it would be very cost ineffective in order to retrofit your VW from US standards to UK standards. And so usually you need to sell the car, and there's a loss on the sale of it. So that's what you're trying to accommodate there. Lease cancellation. If you have a lease, you're going to have to break that lease in order to move to a new location. So that would be taken into consideration. Home finding services, actually finding the home in a new location. It's amazing this day and age, we have so much information on the internet, it becomes overwhelming, that it becomes more beneficial and efficient to have a person who lives there to come and say, hey, what are you looking for? Fantastic. Let's go ahead and align this location because it meets all your needs. That local experience is invaluable and irreplaceable with the amount of information we have on the internet these days. And that's what that would be looking for, finding your home in the new location. Settling in services, this is where you would actually register with local government, or find out where the local post office is, or the local grocery shopping, all these little elements that you really don't think about, you take for granted in your home location. Now, all of a sudden, there's question marks around all of them. And there's companies specialized just in helping you remove those question marks around your daily activities. Spousal assistance. Jordan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, settling in services, really important. Some of the things that people don't think about are things like, how do I get a bank account in the new location? Or how do I get a driver's license in the new location? Those things can be really complicated if you are not or local to a particular area. You might not have any credit history. Settling in services, really, really valuable. Just wanted to add that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting as we go through these are individual line items, but you'll see on the right-hand side here, there's a cost associated with it. And so if you're looking at settling in services, this is for 2 days approximately, $1,900. It seems like, a very easy one to go ahead and snip, but that's what I think we're going to be talking about a little bit is getting rid of this $1,900 really of value to remove from the benefits of your employee? Because there is a huge benefit to the employee, a huge benefit to the family to include this $1,900 benefit, which is one of the cheaper options included in this cost estimate, right? So it's the small things that sometimes go overlooked or sometimes get snipped to the side that could add the most benefit to the employee in many scenarios. Spousal assistance. The employee has a spouse who is also going to be displacing her life or his life. In this scenario, what are they going to do in the new location? Well, odds are they probably can't get a job because that would require other visa and immigration requirements. So how are they going to fill their time in the new location in a fulfilling manner, as opposed to just kind of putting their life on pause while the employee does their job in the new location? And then language training. In this scenario, probably not as necessary going from the US to the UK. I know from experience that some of the words are a little bit different, probably not that different though. But if you go from the US to China or from US to India, there's going to be a value to being able to speak with the people that you're working with. I've been talking a lot. Jordan, I'm going to actually hand this over to you for the on-assignment benefits. I feel like this falls much more into AIRINC's wheelhouse. Go for it.
Sure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about assignments that are provided to expatriates while they are there locally on assignment in the host location. A lot of these are what we call equalization benefits, right? So one of the primary pay philosophy mechanisms that is associated with long-term expatriates is what we call the balance sheet approach. Typically, what is done here is that we are provided, expatriates are provided a series of allowances or differentials that help them bridge any costs between the home location and the host location. That helps to kind of keep them equal, right, and protect their lifestyle. Oftentimes, when you go abroad, costs are much more expensive than they are in your home location. And more importantly, you're just a really bad buyer. You don't know where shops to go to. You don't know what brands to look for. And so usually you'll buy the ones that you're most familiar with, which are the large international brands, right? And those are oftentimes also the most expensive. So we provide things like a cost of living allowance, which specifically relates to those particular concerns. We could provide things like property management services. You may not have sold your home at your home location, and so you may need somebody to come over and mow the grass and collect the mail, make sure that that your property is being maintained. You could also provide transportation in the host country. Obviously, people need to get around. That could be a cash allowance. That could be a company car. Sometimes it's a public transportation allowance. Oftentimes you'll get educational assistance. Typically when we see people going abroad, they can't easily enter the local schooling. And more importantly, when they return back to their home location, you want to make sure that your children can re-enter school in the home location at the same level that they would have had they never left the home location. And so typically the way that this needs to happen is through an international school with an international baccalaureate program, something that's recognized by countries across the globe. So very, very frequently education assistance is provided. And I'll just point out that this is one where it's very difficult to take this away because people don't gamble with the future of their children, right? It's pretty much a non-starter if you say you have to go into local school. So depending on where you're going, right? If you're going to Dallas, that's one thing. If you're going some other places in the world, it might be a different thing. Host location housing and utilities. Again, we want to make sure that you are put into safe, appropriate accommodations for expatriates in the host location. You might need to pay a security deposit, and that looks different all across the globe. There's all kinds of different types of security deposits, like, for example, key money in Japan, which is a very unique one. And I encourage you to go out and read about that one, because it's an interesting one. You could also, you may need some storage in your home location for goods that you didn't ship. Oftentimes we'll deduct what is called a home housing norm. Again, this is how we equalize people, right? So we don't want to just provide housing for free. We want the employee to pay a portion of it, but we only want them to pay whatever they would have paid in their home location. And so that's that home housing deduction, is essentially what they would have paid at home, and then the company will cover any additional costs in the host location. And then lastly, we often see home leave being provided. Home leave is very typical. It allows the person to go back to their home location. This is important for a variety of reasons: keeping up relations with family, keeping up business relations, so that once the assignment ends, that person can find a job back in their home location.
Very cool. I'm going to talk briefly on these because I know Jordan's going to jump into tax costs later on in the conversation, but I want to highlight specifically the sticker shock here. One line item, $338,000 cost to the company.
Right.
There's going to be taxes that need to be paid. Anything paid either to the employee or on behalf of the employee is considered compensation, the same way that your salary is considered compensation. Tax rules vary between different countries. However, at the end of the day, the place you're located, they want taxes paid because the employee is working there. The place that you came from probably wants taxes paid because there's Social Security benefits associated with the employee coming back to the location whenever they go on assignment. So there's, like I said, complicated tax scenario. Everybody wants their piece of the pie. All of these compensation elements, all these line items we've already discussed, they're probably going to be taxed somewhere. And so taking into consideration the tax elements is going to be a huge element as far as the conversation is concerned. Repatriation benefits, I'll hit this very quickly. It's the mirror image of the relocation benefits. Whatever you needed to do to get there, you probably have to do it again to get back, because it's essentially another relocation from your assignment location back to your original location. Specifically call out departure services. This is allowing somebody to come in, prepare the apartment that you're in order to make sure that you can get the security deposit back. This is deregistering environments. This is shutting down bank accounts in order to make sure you can untie all the ties that you made with a new location, so you can go back without any ties to your original location at the end of the day. Service fees are included. And then I want to highlight this real quick, and then we can get into the application of all these benefits. Home location taxes, host location taxes, and hypothetical taxes. Like I said, the host location, where you're doing assignment, they want their piece of the pie. Your old location, there might be some tax credits that you can take in consideration, or foreigner income exclusions, stuff that minimize the home tax liability. But if you are returning to the home location and plan on using the Social Security benefits of the home location, there's still going to be a tax tie where you're still going to be paying taxes in the home location while you're on assignment. And then hypothetical tax, Jordan said this before about how we want you to pay what you would have paid had you never gone on assignment. This is the employee's portion of the taxes. This is what they would have paid for taxes had they never gone on assignment. There's a logistic management and administration behind all of that that makes it so that the employee is made whole. But that's what a lot of this is. Every single benefit on here is trying to make it so that we're minimally disrupting the employee's life as much as possible, whether it's on the familial level, the day-to-day aspects, or on a financial level. How can we make sure that they are the same, not better off, not worse off than if they'd never gone on assignment, while we're putting them through this huge stressor of sending them overseas with their family for a 2-year stint of time. So that's a cost estimate. I think this is a great foundation to kind of jump into. Okay, now we have 60 benefits potentially that we're going to be offering the employee. Which of these are necessary, which of these aren't necessary? Why do we use this one, and why don't we use this other one? I'm going to throw it over to Jordan and let you go into the application of these benefits and how we apply the thought process around them.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so let's see here. Hopefully you can see my screen now. We want to talk through optimization, right? So Jonathan just walked us through a great list of allowances that are typically provided to people when they go on long-term assignment. But I'll just point out that long-term assignments are just one type of assignment. There's a variety of different types of assignments, and everybody's a little bit different. And so what we want to know here is, how do we optimize costs, right? We can certainly talk a little bit about reducing costs and which elements, may or may not be necessary. But when I think about this question of how do we provide services at the right cost level, it's really about optimization. And I think it's helpful to start with just a little bit of a history lesson here, right? A long time ago, back in the 1950s, is really when sort of expatriates started to become formalized with typical pay structures and different things like that. We had this philosophy, equalization to home. I talked about the balance sheet earlier. That's really what you see on the left-hand side of the screen. Long-term, home-based equalized assignment. It's really a very costly type of assignment. But then as time went on and the world became more globalized, we had more different types of mobility needs. So we had short-term assignees, or we have globalists, right? People who maybe don't really have a home and they just float from project to project to project. We also have now Host Plus, where we would employ somebody in the host location, but provide them a series of allowances to kind of provide a little bit of that equalization that we might have seen on the long-term assignments. We also have permanent transfers, and I'll just point out that this is a very short list. We have rotators or commuters or all kinds of different types of assignments these days, and they all have different cost levels. And when we think about what cost level or what type of assignment that we should put people on, I typically say that it's based on two things. First is purpose. Most companies want to have some sort of assignment strategy that fits with the way that they think about their talent development, the type of experience that they want their talent to have. And so on the left-hand side, you can see this 4-box model. This was developed by Deloitte quite some time ago, but it still holds very true today in the industry. On the left-hand side, you can see developmental value, and on the bottom side, you can see business value, and that relates to a particular individual. If we have a business leader, right, who maybe we want to grow into, maybe they run a regional team right now, but we want to grow them into a national leader, that might be somebody who has high developmental value and high business value. And so that would be a strategic opportunity, and they would usually get a different set of benefits than somebody who is raising their hand to go on assignment. Or maybe somebody who we're just sending to help us set up a new manufacturing location. They're going to be there for 6 months and then they're going to come back home. So the purpose of the assignment often dictates the type of assignment that you'll go on, and often the type of benefits that you'll get. That's one side of it, right? That's the sort of the philosophical side of it, but there's also the budget side of it. Each company, each business unit within each company has a different budget, and some of them can afford more or less than other business units within their company or different companies. And so you need to sort of balance the purpose, why we're sending these people, what type of experience we want them to have, with the budget that we have available. Those two things kind of intersect to create the right type of mobility policy and also the right type of benefits that go into the mobility policy. And so we just walked through a whole list, a long list of potential policy benefits. I'll mention that very frequently, companies will do what is called benchmarking. So at AIRINC, we run a series of surveys that ask companies, do you provide a COLA? If so, how do you calculate the COLA? What level of COLA do you provide? High, medium, and low, different things like that. That allows us to tell companies what is most prevalent in the industry. And so companies will come and they'll do a lot of benchmarking to make sure that their policies are fair and competitive and aligned with their company's strategy. Jonathan, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about not just the benefits themselves, but the way that policies are potentially arranged here.
Yeah. So, I mean, as we're kind of looking at cost optimization, you have to look at what you're solving for. And so we find there's a balance here. And this is specifically talking about the initial relocation and the repatriation side of the relocation, not necessarily the on-assignment benefits. But there's a slew of benefits you can provide, or you could provide, hey, here's $20,000 cash, you're good to go. And anywhere in between is going to have different elements on site that solve for different pieces. So what we find is that service versus cost is going to be in direct competition in some circumstances. So if you have this full service of people showing up at your house, they have white gloves on, they gently take your plates and they wrap them in bubble wrap, and then they put them in a box, and then they do that over and over and over again, get everything into a nice box, and they get it onto a truck that ultimately puts it into a container that ships it overseas, that then gets it to the new location, and then a new person with white gloves shows up and they take the plate out, they unwrap the bubble wrap, and they put it on the shelf. That's very expensive, very expensive. Alternatively, you could have the employee have a garage sale, sell everything in the home location, and then in the new location, you could give them a furniture allowance that allows them to buy new furniture at the new location. Those are two options. Now, the question is, what's the better experience for the employee, and what are they looking for? So, for example, if you have somebody who's very established in their career, they have a family, they have their house settled and everything, odds are they probably have a lot of stuff that they want to hold on to. They don't want to go have a garage sale. Wine shipments are something that come up a lot of times. If you have a wine collection, do you encourage them to go have a party with their friends before they go on assignment, or do you ship the wine to the new location? Odds are they have wine collection, they're pretty established. Alternatively, if you have a new college grad, my experience coming out of college was I didn't have a lot of stuff. In fact, most of the stuff I got was probably secondhand and was very disposable. I would be happy to take a furniture allowance in the new location because I don't have the physical ties to the old location. So cost, it's not necessarily a matter of cost versus service. It's a matter of what's the better experience for the individual who's being moved by your company, right? The other alternative is flexibility versus compliance. I would love to work all over the world. I would love to just drop into a new country and be like, hey, I'm going to work here for the next 3 months. It's going to be fantastic. That's ultimate flexibility. However, most countries, you can't go into them and just say, hey, I'm going to work here for the next month. They're probably going to flag somebody and say, okay, where's your official documentation? Going back to the visa and immigration, what documents have you filed? Do you have the necessary visa to support you working in the new location? And some countries become semi-restrictive with that. There are very specific scenarios that you can work in that country. And a lot of it has to do with, are you a very specialized skill set that is hard to source in the new location? I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I'm nothing special in that regards. And so maybe I can't get into that country to work for my company. The other piece of it is tax restrictions. If you work in a new location for your company, there is a potential of what we call permanent establishment, which would make it so that your company has to put roots down in that location and report corporate taxes and corporate returns in that new location. That becomes a headache for your company, and you probably don't want to put your company through that regard. And so as we look at flexibility versus compliance, looking at the tiered versus the points versus cafeteria versus all these really fun terminologies that the people in the relocation industry have come up with in order to find what is the best level of service versus cost and flexibility for compliance that not only meet and are compliant with the local entities, but also are a great experience for the employee as they're moving from one place to the next, displacing their entire lives and putting themselves through one of the most stressful environments they possibly could.
Jonathan, could I just ask you perhaps to just briefly explain what these things mean across the bottom, so tiered points, cafeteria, core flex, because I think maybe not everyone in the student audience would know what that meant.
Great question. Thank you. So if we look at tiered, that's where you'd say you are based on your job level or the other identifiers that Jordan mentioned about your specialization and where your place is in the company. This is your tier of benefit. And here are your benefits that you receive as part of that. Household goods, temporary living, and it's probably robust. So the example of the cost estimate I showed you, it probably has most or all or even more than what is on the cost estimate I showed you. So it's very robust in nature, but it doesn't really give you the flexibility of choosing what you want to use it for, right? So that's where we get to points. Whenever we get to points, we might have a core element where we have household goods and temporary living and language training and pretty robust front end. But then in order to give you a little bit more flexibility, we're going to give you like a bank of points. And here's a list of all the things that you can use your points for in order to accommodate your specific needs. Going down a little bit more is, say, a cafeteria selection. Think you're actually at the cafeteria, you have your tray. Here's all the different areas that you can choose from. And then you load up your tray. But whenever your tray is full, that's the benefits that you receive. And so that's a lot of flexibility. However, there's maybe not as much cost associated with it, or more cost containment, rather, is a better way of putting it. And then as far as compliance, they can choose whatever they want. If they want to go in and choose just a massive lump sum, they can choose that. And then you have to deal with the headache of relocating your household goods and temporary living. Core Flex, here's your core benefits. And it's probably a little bit more minimal. So household goods, temporary living. And then Flex, here's all the other items, kind of cafeteria elements that you can use after the core has been identified. Lump sum plus, here's your lump sum. Plus, we're going to give you a couple other benefits, such as household goods. Capped, we're going to say you can spend exactly 15 grand or $20,000. And you can use whatever you want, but you are stuck in that capped limit. And so it kind of becomes limited in nature. And the last one is lump sum. Here's $20,000 and Google, good luck. And there is a place for that. I'm not going to say that it's the worst option. There's definitely a place for that. But just knowing the implications there, that if the employee goes and chooses Joe Schmo's moving company to move their household goods, you can't stand behind the vendor that they selected because of budgetary and cost restriction purposes. So just knowing the implications of all the benefits that you're offering the employee.
Also, Jonathan, if you're allowing people to make all these choices for themselves, could companies leave themselves open to compliance issues with tax or immigration and so on? Or would you always say that those things should be provided?
Jordan, I'm going to throw it to you. You had thoughts, and then I have thoughts on top of your thoughts.
Yes, sorry, Jonathan.
So first, we have a spectrum of what I would call policy delivery strategies here, right? So from tiered to lump sum that Jonathan just walked us through. This is how we provide the benefits to people. And I think that, in my experience, compliance is always a core concern of organizations. And I think that depending on the priorities of the organization and potentially the situation of the move, you'll find different use cases for this. So for example, if you have a US domestic move for a junior level employee, there's very little compliance concern in that particular scenario. And so in those scenarios, you might see people provide a lump sum or a cap, managed cap is what it's often called, or maybe a lump sum plus, or different things like that. But if you have a very complex international move for a business leader, you're going to see probably more of a tiered or points or cafeteria style plan, because again, we need to address those compliance concerns.
Thank you.
Yep. One other maybe just note about this is that Jonathan was earlier talking about cost versus service. I think it's really interesting to think about the long-term ROI here. So yes, of course, it costs us a lot to put people on these tiered plans with managed moves and all of these services. But what's the benefit of it? Well, the benefit of it is that they can more easily move to the new location. They can get to work right away. And if we have very senior people that are generating a lot of income or revenue for our organization, it might be a lot better for us to make sure that they can get to work right away, as opposed to them figuring out the move themselves and us saving money on the move. So you have to think about the overall ROI here. And there are a lot of reasons why companies invest in these more expensive types of policies.
Hershey, did you have a question or a comment?
Yes. So kind of going off of Claire's question, how would you might handle during the planning process maybe employee pressure or external pressure for maybe a better package or more budget in a certain area that a transfer employee would want? How would you kind of go about that process?
Sure. It's a great question. So a couple considerations there. One is going back to flexibility versus compliance. If you have more flexible policies, you can empower the employee to spend the points or the money the way that they would need to in order to accommodate what their specific needs are. That's one piece. The second piece is relocation packages, like any benefits provided by the company, are a benefit for the employee. They're trying to attract talent. They're trying to encourage the employee to do the job overseas, in this scenario, a little bit unique, but they're trying to encourage the employee, entice them even, to take the job. And so whenever you look at paid time off or medical benefits or 401k contributions or those more traditional items that are negotiated as part of taking a job. Relocation's right in the same sphere, right? And so I would say build a package that's going to be competitive. To Jordan's point about benchmarking, if you are hiring against a large tech company such as Google or Microsoft, you probably are going to have comparable expensive big packages in order to compete in that environment, in order to entice and attract the talent necessary. So build a package for what you're trying to allow for. The second thing is have the conversation. I mean, if you do not have cash benefits, if you have a tiered policy like this, you can negotiate the benefits in a way that is in line with policy and keep the employee happy. We are all human. We are all have very unique scenarios, and no one size is going to fit all. I think having that conversation the same way that you have a PTO conversation or paid time off or holiday conversation is very beneficial. But that has to happen before the offer is made and accepted, as opposed to during. Because if you try to change scenarios as you're moving a person from point A to point B, it becomes very complex very quickly.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about the types of benefits that are provided, the ways that we might provide those benefits, the delivery mechanisms. But one thing that kind of sits behind the scenes that I think we need to address is taxes. So Jonathan showed you a really large number on the cost estimate report that I think was $300,000. That's a very typical tax cost, to be honest. One of the things that we need to think about when we think about taxes are what we refer to as tax gross-ups. This is a simplified approach. When we think about it from an international perspective, it becomes much more complex, where we would need to consider foreign tax credits and different types of income treaties, whether those are totalization agreements or social security treaties or different things like that. But in this very simplified example, what I want to show you guys here is that if I want somebody to get a benefit that is estimated at $1,000 US, if I pay them $1,000 US, we're going to withhold taxes from that at a rate of 22%. And that means that they only receive $780 in income. So that didn't really achieve my goal of giving them that $1,000 benefit, right? Like maybe the flight from the home location to the host location is $1,000. Well, if they only have 780, they have to pay the 220 out of their pocket. Not ideal, not really our intention. And so what we need to do is we need to provide a gross up on the taxes. And so in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to do a gross up excuse me, let's try that one more time. We're going to gross up $1,000 at a rate of 22%. And what that means is that we actually have to pay $1,282 to have this person receive $1,000. Now you'll notice that that's more than 22%. And that's because there's this idea of tax on tax. This is a very common question that we get in the industry is why are the tax costs so high? And so what we need to realize here is that what we see is, tax related to assignment and relocation allowances and the allowances themselves. But what the government sees is that assignment related income plus their salary and incentive, and they consider all of that to be taxable income. And as Jonathan mentioned earlier, we may have tax obligations in our home location. We may have them in our host location. Some things are taxable, some things aren't taxable. It gets really very complicated. And then all of that is taxed on this taxable income. There's this sort of iterative gross up methodology, which happens, which creates just huge cost exposure for companies. So I think if we're here to talk about optimization of policies, how do we strip costs out of the policies? We have to talk about taxes. One of my clients told me the other day, and I love this, it's not about what the number is. They use our cost estimation tool, right? And it allows them to go back and iterate on it. Say, what if we took this tax position? What if we broke residency at the home location? What if we invoked this tax treaty? It's not about what the tax is, it's about what the tax could be. And so that's where you see a lot of organizations spending a lot of money on tax consultation, not just for the assignee, but for the program themselves. You'll notice that there are the big four tax firms play very heavily in the mobility market. Vialto was formerly PwC. They've recently spun off. There's also some smaller firms that do a great job, GTN, Anderson Tax. There's a lot of people in the mobility industry who specifically focus on tax because it drives a huge amount of cost for employers.
Just going back to Hershey's question, really about pressure from maybe assignees to get a better package and so on. What struck me when we first looked at Jonathan's original list of benefits, when he looked at the individual things, apart from the household goods shipment, most of those amounts seemed relatively modest. But then when you see the tax implications, that's when you see the real impact of this. And is that something that is conveyed properly to a potential assignees, do you think, or is that sort of a missing part of the process somewhat?
Well, yes and no, I would say, right? So typically it's very hard for us to talk about taxes in a way that matters to assignees, right? Mm. They don't necessarily need to know about this tax on tax on tax. So a lot of times, they may not see all of that. That said, we do provide tax briefings that's more specific to the individual tax obligations. Those are mostly for compliance purposes. Now, that said, I do know of some organizations, they're actually in the total rewards sphere. And these are companies that are putting together sort of total rewards overviews. And what they're starting to do is for mobile employees to include these types of assignment related income and potentially some of the tax benefits as well, so that they can see the total investment that is made to them from the company. Right? Yes,
that's really what I'm trying to get at. That that maybe assignees don't always appreciate exactly what the companies are investing. They see the sort of the benefits that they might get in their hands, but they're not seeing what's going on behind the scenes.
Yes. Yeah.
I would say a couple things here. One is, if it's going really, really well, the employee is not thinking about taxes and is not aware of all the taxes that are being paid on their behalf. And to that end, I've had companies that have tried to reverse engineer the gross up calculation in order to make it a withholding element so that the employee does feel this is the amount of tax we gave, and now we've withheld it to offset your tax liability. But the employee kind of sees it as, well, now you're taking something away from me. You should just give me tax gross up on that. And so it really becomes convoluted in order to kind of show that to the employee. And in some circumstances, the employee, I just got a question today. Hey, Jonathan, where's my gross up check? And it's not a gross up check. This is taxes already paid on your behalf. And so it really becomes a complicated scenario because honestly, most of these people are not hired to manage tax or manage numbers. They're really good at another job. This is not their area of expertise. And so trying to explain that, it becomes very challenging at the end of the day to get them to comprehend the amount of tax the company is paying on their behalf until they try to file for financial aid to get their child into school. Now, all of a sudden, their W-2, which includes not just their $150,000 salary, but also includes the $300,000 of relocation expenses paid on top of that, their W-2 is saying $450,000. That becomes very evident to them about how much benefit the company is paying on their behalf, but it's viewed in a very negative light because now all of a sudden they can't get their financial aid for their child because their W-2 says $450,000 as opposed to the $150,000 that they see in their paycheck. So I think there's an opportunity to proactively put that in front of the employee, but I don't think it's an easy element to convey in a way that shows the goodwill of the company, as it were.
Let's just say that taxes are incredibly complicated and they drive a huge amount of cost for the assignee and the organization sending assignees. is, as I mentioned, just, a really complex thing. And I always say that, if you want to get into the mobility industry, tax is a great place to start. I mean, there's a lot of other places to start, right? Jonathan, in organizations like his are great places to start. My organization, we focus a little bit more on mobility compensation, so that's just sort of one part of the picture. But tax is a great way to get into the industry because everybody has to focus on taxes. Maybe the last thing that we were going to talk to you guys a little bit about is that it's not just the benefits that you provide when we think about global mobility cost optimization. You also have to think about the type of mobility function that you have. Obviously, you're going to have costs to send people, you're going to have tax costs, but you have to also employ people to provide these services within your organization, to consult with the businesses and help them understand what types of options they have available to them. And depending on the type of organization you are in, it may look a little bit different. So let's just say that we have a consulting firm who sends people all around the globe, and they are there for 3 to 9 months working on projects, right? In that type of organization, you may have more of a transactional mobility function, and you can see that in the orange box here. If we have an organization who thinks mobility is really a strategic driver of their talent strategy, you might have more of a talent-aligned mobility function. And each of these ways of putting together the mobility function have different types of costs, right? So if you have to, for example, service delivery, right? If you have it in-house, well, that is one cost, right? If you outsource it to an organization like Jonathan's, that's a different cost. And they might actually be relatively similar in terms of overall cost. Maybe so then you make the decision based on the types of services that could be delivered and different things like that. But you definitely need to think about the cost of providing these types of policies and programs. And so I think maybe just to end here, when I think about effective mobility teams, those are the ones that deploy the right talent in the right places at the right cost, right? It's not necessarily about doing it at the lowest cost. It's about doing it at the right investment level for the situation. So questions on that?
I think, Hershey, you had some questions about working with service vendors, didn't you?
Yes. So actually kind of circling back to the beginning of the presentation when we were talking a lot about transferring employees and kind of to that local area to make that process very smooth for them. So I was wondering if companies, do you guys have strategic partnerships and alliances with the local businesses and organizations during those international assignments? And if that's a strategy to have those partnerships with local businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest values that an RMC or a relocation management company like Odyssey brings is they have to have those relationships. So for example, Odyssey's in 200 plus countries because we have contacts and we have relationships and we have the supply chain in order to support 200 countries. I don't speak Farsi, for example. You don't want to be packing your household goods. It would all be broken whenever it got to the location. So thank God that we have this network of people that are fantastic at what they do, that whenever we're looking at, okay, here's the 7 benefits that we need to offer this employee, we're going to assign the best partner for household goods, best partner for temporary living, best partner for language training, best so on and so forth, in order to make sure they have a fantastic experience at the end of the day. So yes, that has to be the element, because nobody can be everywhere and do everything at the exact same time.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. We have a few more minutes on our webinar, so please do feel free to put any questions, students, regarding the case competition. This is the time for you guys to have those questions answered. So please put them in the chat. So I guess I have one more question. What are like the prioritization for companies to rather allocate funding towards existing employees rather than acquiring talent from that specific location? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'll take first swing at this, Jordan, because I came prepared for this one. I did. I'm not a company that relocate people. My company relocates people, but my Odyssey employees are not the ones being relocated. So I did take it to one of our corporate clients. I said, what's your philosophy? And they said, hire local first. That's their first thought. But then second is find the best talent. And those kind of compete. And that's where relocation can really come in handy, is if the local talent is not the best talent for the scenario they're doing, then you bring the talent in from wherever it is in order to make sure that they can get the job done. So that's the thought process. Hire local first if the talent is there. If not, bring them in order to get the job done.
Got it.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Jonathan. And I think that one of the things that we see mobility teams, in-house mobility teams at organizations working on mostly these days, is consulting with their business units to help them understand their options, right? So, of course, we're going to hire locally, but if we can't, we need to know what options are available to us. And so we're starting to see some companies introduce internal labor markets, which help you to say, oh, here are people that could fill this particular role, and here are the costs to get them into that location. And so kind of pairing up the, that available talent market with the mobility costs, it's, sort of something that we're seeing starting to grow in the industry a little bit.
Yes. I think just looking at the comments, I can see that Michelle Oines has made a very good point, and I was just about to raise it actually, that obviously there's pressure in some countries to hire local, isn't there?
Yeah.
So Singapore has I think fair, I forget what it's called now, but they have the fair framework, and Saudiization in Saudi Arabia. What are your thoughts about that? And last time we did our APAC summit in September last year, I remember one of our speakers talking about this and saying that they were taking a rather different approach, and that they were trying to focus on developing that talent. Yes, it might not be right at the sort of the point that they need it now, but they want to develop that local talent so that it's actually more sustainable for the future, and that you're investing in people who are actually in that location. What do you think about that?
We see this a lot, right? So if you think about this, if you want to run an international organization, you need people with an international mindset. And so the best way to develop that is to send people on assignment. And so we typically see this with leadership development programs and different things like that, right? And there's, those can be quite costly, but it's a good expense to pay, because it infuses that type of culture within your organization. Yes, and as Michelle mentions here, also moving that talent can help you to infuse that culture in different ways, right? And build that culture and make new connections, right? That's what mobility is all about, is getting people to places where they can be more effective in their organizations.
Yeah.
I think this is a great case for temporary assignments. So I think long-term temporary assignments in particular are becoming less and less frequent. However, to develop local talent, there are some things you can teach in textbook. There are some things you can teach online. There are some things you only can teach face-to-face. And so the value of sending a person who exhibits the company culture, the mission of the company, and really lives, breathes, and just everything about his life is company related. And you can only get that infusion with that face-to-face time. And so the temporary assignment makes a ton of sense in that case. You don't need that person over long-term. Teach them the foundational tools, the textbook tools in the new location, send over the culture in the form of a person, infuse that culture in the new location, and then pull them back out again. And then you have that development, and you can allow the local talent to really drive the local environment.
Yes, I guess it means that, you've got to look at the intention behind that assignment, haven't you? I think Jordan's point about it being a fantastic tool for developing leaders is a really pertinent one.
Yes. So with that, we've come to the end of our webinar. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to our speakers, Jordan and Jonathan, and thank you to Claire for her support to make this happen. And so with that, we're going to end the webinar. So thank you guys so much for joining today.
Thanks, everyone.
Much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.